I've been thinking about this moment for a while. What would be the very first thing I said? And I had lots of ideas. And in fact, the very first thing I'm going to say is, can you please get your cups together? And stewardesses are going to walk around and collect any loose cups hanging around, because that's what they've instructed me to say. Although I don't know where they are. Are they there? I feel like an aeroplane person. Aeroplanes are hilarious, aren't they? I was on an aeroplane recently. I sound like a comedian already, don't I? On my way to the studio today, and they give that safety talk, which you have to pretend to be watching because you feel rude, and you've heard it 1,000 times. And she said, in the event of hitting water, life jackets, blah blah, and blow this whistle. I thought, if a 100-ton jet crashing into the sea doesn't attract attention, what's a whistle going to do? It was really strange, but I go to the Isle of Man occasionally to do consultation there to their family therapy team, and the first time I ever went, the woman at the desk at the airport said to me, is it possible that anybody interfered with your baggage without you knowing? I thought, whoa, this is a hard question. Is it possible they did it without me knowing? I thought, this is tough. So I had to phone up the Isle of Man later and say, listen, I failed the philosophy test. I won't be coming today. So, top 10 systemic tips. When Gary gave me this title, I thought, that's great, I can do anything I want in the world, but actually it's turned out really hard because too much choice is bad. But I have to say, they're not necessarily top, because, I wouldn't presume such a thing. I think they're just things that have interested me and I hope interest you. I also wouldn't say they're tips necessarily. Tips is a bit too much like advice, and it's not particularly seen as it to be given advice, so that's not necessarily true. Not sure about systemic either. What is systemic, as I sometimes mischievously say to colleagues in allocation meetings. And they say, do you think this has systemic features about it, this case? Do you think they need a systemic approach? I'll say, well, does the person have a gender? Do they have a class, a culture, a race, a parent or two, a sibling? Do they have an order in that sibling, oldest, youngest, middle? Are they of this world, really? If the answer to any of those questions is yes, then yes, it has systemic features. So what's systemic then, they say? I say, well, it's everything. And I kind of think it is. But I suppose in fairness, psychodynamic colleagues could say to us, well, if they feel or think, then it has psychodynamic qualities, so we do need to communicate with each other. So, systemic. There's also not 10 of them. I don't know how many there are. I got a bit mixed up with numbers, so we'll see how it goes. You tell me. But other than that, the title's exact. I suppose what that leads to is irreverence, which, I suppose people who know me know I think I have a healthy relationship with irreverence. I like being irreverent. Anything that is, prescribed or powerful, I kind of find myself rebelling against. I don't know where that comes from. Possibly some Scouse thing or some Italian thing. I don't know. Anyway, it's how it is, and I think in a world of evidence-based practice and research and the importance of everything, the way the world's going, it's really important, of course, to bear in mind those things. But I also think it's also important to be irreverent towards them as well. I need 2 tables to look at things. Where's Peter Stratton? He's at the back, isn't he? Peter, there was something of a hagiography yesterday of Peter. He is our hero. He's the research man who we all look up to, and he's made fantastic contributions to our field, and that's of course crucially important, as is DAFT, as is the board, as are our relationships with politics and the media, and to be on the top tables. All of those things we need to know. We need people to know the importance of our profession and what we do. But, I also do wonder about what do we know and what can we know. I read something recently. The 3 most influential people of the last 200 years were all men, all European, all white, of course, all Jewish, interestingly, and they are Karl Marx, Albert Einstein, and Sigmund Freud, and all wrong. Only today in the paper is a story about how Einstein was wrong. So, you know, maybe, let's agree, we'll all come back in 50 years and we'll talk about the things we do today and how we believe them to be so good and so right, and we'll laugh about what we used to do. So, I guess a healthy irreverence towards some of the things we do. You know, another bit of research I read recently was the 4 most influential things that influence therapists in their practice are, in fact, their own experience of personal therapy, their own experience of delivering therapy, their own personal life story, and supervision, not research itself. Seems that therapists don't read research and say, oh, that's good, I'm going to do that. Other than the therapeutic relationship itself, which we all know is the single most important thing. So, manualised therapy is something I have a difficulty with. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how 2 people can deliver the same thing, even if it's the same model, even if it's exactly the same words in the script, there are differences. It's like, if I use music as an analogy for a second, you know, a great singer can make a rubbish song good, and a bad singer can ruin a good song. Have you ever heard Bob Dylan sing Yesterday? It's check it out on YouTube, it's really there, it's not good. And I love Dylan, he's my hero, but he shouldn't sing Yesterday. I suppose Paul McCartney singing Desolation Row would be equally bad, but you know, it's so... If you get my point, we live in a busy world, don't we, and of payment by results and proving things, and it's fast. Do you know the abbreviation for July? It's JUL. That's how busy we are. We just haven't got time for that letter Y. It's just too busy. People who write on the, what they call the DAFT talk board website thing that we all contribute to, and some of us contribute to, that Nick Child. It's great on that. Some people write, you know, pages and pages of letters and notes and tones and end it with BW. Best wishes. Just too busy to write best wishes. But, you know, the rest of it is great. Duke Ellington said, music happens between the notes. I think therapy creates space between the client's words and lives and movement so that they can fill in the blanks. Some of us want a therapy recipe with a guarantee, but a good therapist charms the imagination. Some of us are trained and expected to only provide evidence-based treatments. Therapy asks us to come into a direct relationship with who we are, and we as therapists need to know who we are. And who we are is different at different times. We were talking about this yesterday in the question time thing about the self, and at breakfast this morning, having a good chat about the self. It's great. So, you know, it's a complex question, isn't it? We are different people at different times, but each of those is valid, is authentic, I hope, you know, depending on whether we're parents or children, or speaking with colleagues, or friends, or enemies, or commissioners, or whoever it is, we are different, but none of them is necessarily false or inauthentic. And who we present and perform, I suppose, is different as well. Sometimes I'm a sophisticated therapist, sometimes I'm a cheeky scouser, sometimes I'm a million different things, and you are too. In fact, a colleague said to me recently, "You don't seem yourself today." I said, "Well, why are you telling me?" Louis Armstrong said, and if you replace the word jazz with family therapy perhaps, Louis Armstrong said, if you have to ask what jazz is, you'll never know. If you ain't got it in you, you can't blow it out. There are some people that if they don't know, you can't tell them. We do do, re, mi, but you've got to find the other notes yourself. What you play is life. And I think that's true for therapy as well. How to research, I think it's crucial, as I've said, it's important for our discipline, it's also so difficult. I saw a couple a few years ago, and they didn't come back. So, as that happens to all of us, we live with the not knowing of what might have happened, why they didn't come back. And about a month later, I bumped into the woman in Tesco. She came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm glad to see you." I said, "Oh, how you doing? You didn't come back." She said, "We didn't need to." I said, "Well, what happened?" She said, "I'll never forget it. You were in the room with me and my husband, and you sat there and you looked at me and you pointed to my husband and you said, 'He will never be the man you want him to be and never make the changes you want him to make.'" And I thought, you know what, he's right. So I went home. Straight after that session, I went home, packed my bags and left. And I've never been so happy. And of course, I didn't say that. So how do you measure that? So the lesson, I guess, is be careful not only what you say, but what you don't say. So it's a difficult one. The power of words is crucial. I'll come on to language in a minute, or later. There's a song by Bob Dylan called Lonesome Day Blues, which I love. I mention him a lot. And there's a line, a bit in it which he just sings, "Well, I'm 40 miles from the mill, I'm dropping it into overdrive. I'm 40 miles from the mill, I'm dropping it into overdrive. Set my dial on the radio, I wish my mother was still alive." I love that song so much, I love his voice, I love the way he just delivers it, and it does have a resonance for me in therapy. The delivery is important. And it makes me think, oh, 40 miles, I wish I was 40 miles from the mill. Where's the mill? How can you be 40 miles from a mill? Aren't you like nearer to something else than a mill? It's bizarre. And I'm going to set my dial on the radio. And I wish my mother was alive. And the thing is, she is alive. But it's so powerful how he does it, how he sings. I went for an interview for a job many, many years ago with nobody connected with anything to do with this. And after a very short while, I realised I do not want this job. But I had to go through with the interview, and I was kind of, I thought, a bit pompously asked, so what's your approach to working with survivors of sexual abuse? What's your model? What would you do? How do you think about this? And I just said, be kind to them. And they looked and thought, And I said, that's it, be kind to them. I didn't get the job. But since then I thought, was that such a bad answer? Really? I do believe in that. We know family therapy works. We can't rely on our knowledge or experience, anecdotal stories, but we know it works. I know it works. It makes so much sense. I believe, we need the researchers we've got and the people who do the great work for us. We need to be involved in IAPT. IAPT, which, in case anybody doesn't know, stands for Improved Access to CBT. Number 2. This is the only exercise I'll be asking you to do today, so don't worry, it's very brief. Could you just rearrange your chairs and split into 2 groups of 120? No. Okay? So I wonder if you could just have a look at this thing I'm going to put on the board quickly, and just speak with your neighbour for literally 30 seconds. Say hello if you don't know them, and just see what you notice and share that with your neighbour. Oh, that's coming next. I forgot this. I'm going to end with 2 quotes. Sorry, we're still on point 1. Go back. Just 2 quotes I like from Einstein. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. And not everything that can be counted counts. Not everything that counts can be counted. I like Einstein. He was wrong, but not in that case. Okay. If you have a look at this, see what you notice, and just speak with your neighbour for 30 seconds about it. Okay. How you doing? How you doing? 30 seconds is up. Stop. Okay. Have you all got something? Okay. Alright, so did anybody, you can't cheat now because you've shared it. Who said all the answers were in ascending order? Who said all the answers? Oh, one person. Very good. Who said all the answers were odd numbers? Who said all the answers were prime numbers? Very good. About 5? Who said one of them was wrong? Oh, everybody. You'll get the point, won't you? This is what we do. This is what we do. We look for what's wrong. And I think we do this a lot in our work, don't we, in fact? And there's a lot else to notice. I recently asked the family about themselves, which I habitually do before getting into problem talk. And this kid who'd been everywhere, seeing everybody, and had tons of referral information on him. And I said to his mother, what else do you do in your spare time when you're not being a mother and you're not at work? Any interests? She said, oh, I'm in the Operatic Society. And so is he. He's a singer. In fact, he's in, I forget what it was Don Giovanni next week. I thought, oh my God, that's fantastic. And that's mentioned nowhere. It's a really interesting, important bit of information about this kid who was, as far as everybody else knew, was just a complete rogue. So that was fascinating. Looking for the good. It's an interesting relationship, isn't it, between good and bad and words like that we postmodernists don't really like very much. But here's an interesting little story which I made up. It's true, but I discovered it in a sense. So you heard it here first. In the summer of 1940, a woman called Mary Mohan was visiting her friend's house, and the air raid sirens rang, and so, like everybody else in the area, she ran to the communal air raid shelter and stayed there while the bombs were dropping. It was a particularly ferocious night, so they had to stay there all night. It wasn't until the next morning that they left. And during that time, she got chatting to a guy called Jim, who was a jazz musician and a cotton trader. Mary was 31, Jim was 38. And they became quite friendly. They agreed to meet again. And Mary later said of Jim, I found him charming and utterly uncomplicated, was her quote, which is, I suppose, nice, isn't it? So they met again, they struck up a relationship, they ended up going out. A year later they got married, and in June 1942 they had their first child, a boy, who they called James. Now none of that would have happened if it wasn't for the bombing of Liverpool that night, if it wasn't for for Hitler's bombs dropping. Mary and Jim would never have met, never have got married, never have had a son called James, and he would never have changed his name later in life to Paul, being known as Paul McCartney. So the connection is, without Hitler, there would have been no Paul McCartney, there would have been no Beatles. It's a strange world we live in, isn't it? It's, history is a series of accidents, really. I know a lot of people in this room became family therapists by chance. They discovered it by accident. And the story goes further. Hitler's parents, Alois and Clara, were uncle and niece. And in order to get married, being devout Catholics, they were good people. They had to seek the dispensation of the local bishop, the Bishop of Linz, who actually refused. So they went above him and went to the Pope, and the Pope agreed. So the Pope agreed for Hitler's parents to marry, which the consequence of which we all know. So without that Pope, there would be no Beatles. It's a complicated world, isn't it, we live in, of connections. I've got loads of stuff here about John Lennon, which I use a lot when I'm talking with kids, because John, to me, is a great example of a kid with a bad life who made good. I don't know how much you know about him. I won't go into it now, really. He was abandoned by both parents. He was never a happy man. Very confused and contradictory. He was, and in later life he sang about peace, but he was a violent man. He sang about no possessions, but had a whole floor apparently full of fur coats. A confused, unhappy man. When he made it to the very top and became, the biggest person around ever in the history of the world, possibly of rock music, he famously said, "Is this it? I don't feel any different. I don't feel any better." So I sometimes use that story and more with with boys I work with who've got issues with their parents. What I don't tell them is the bad bits about how messed up John was as well, poor man. And my favourite Beatles story is when they were introduced to LSD. This sums up the difference really between John and Paul. They were introduced to it by John Lowndes, who was the first husband of Bob Dylan's first wife. I'll get me anorak. And he said to them, "This, boys, will change your life. You'll never be the same again. This fantastic chemical drug, it's great." And Paul said, being a happy chap, Paul said, "What do you mean? Hang on a minute, what exactly will happen?" And he wanted to know the ins and outs. John said, "Gizzy." I'll have it now. It changes our lives. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Who's that by? Correct, Magritte. And again, and again, and again. No connection, I just thought you might like to see some pictures at this point and get a bit fed up with my voice. Now I do have a story about Magritte, but I'm not sure about how we're doing for time. We'll see. But it's to do with making false connections. I might come back to that. But that end of it, this one, which, as you know, says, "This is not a pipe." I think by this, Magritte meant this is a picture of a pipe. It's not actually a pipe. And the connection for that, for me, is the map is not the territory. Well-known saying to us family therapists. And who said that? Do you know who coined the phrase or invented that phrase? The map is not the territory. Most people think it was Bateson. Brian Cage, right over there. It was this man. Do you know who he is? We don't even know him, do we? Brian, tell us who it is. Korzybski, as they say in Poland. That's how his family pronounce it. I was on the phone to them last night. Korzybski. And I think he's one of the great forgotten influences in family therapy. Not many people know about him. He died in 1950. His work maintained that human beings are limited in what they know by the structure of their nervous systems and the structure of their languages. Human beings cannot experience the world directly, but only through their abstractions. Sometimes our perceptions and our languages actually mislead us to the facts with which we must deal. His system included modifying the way we consider the world with an attitude of "I don't know, let's see." He also thought that certain uses of the verb "to be," which he calls the "is" of identity, were faulty in structure. So an example he gave was, Elizabeth is a fool, said of a person named Elizabeth who's done something we regard as foolish. In Korzybski's system, one assessment of Elizabeth belongs to a higher order of abstraction than Elizabeth herself. Korzybski's remedy was to deny identity in this example, to be aware continually that Elizabeth is not what we call her. One day, Korzybski was given a lecture to a group of students. He interrupted to open a packet of biscuits and started eating them, offered them to a student. Would anybody like one of these? A few students in the front row took them. In fact, I should have done this, shouldn't I? Anybody want? And after a while, he took the packaging off properly and revealed a picture of a dog on a big sign saying "dog biscuits." Literally, 2 students threw up. One of them ran out to the toilet. And he remarked, "I've just demonstrated that people don't just eat food, but also words, and that the taste of the former is often outdone by the taste of the latter." So from Korzybski we have the map is not the territory, influencing Bateson, the not knowing approach, influencing Gulishian and Anderson, avoidance of the verb "to be," taken up so well by the Milan associates later, structure of the brain, promoting constructivism, influencing Maturana and many others, and the importance of language, influencing everyone, from Gergen to everyone. So, I like Korzybski. Where are we up to now? How many points have I said 10 yet? Alright, point 4, I think, is about asking good questions. Can't beat a good question, can you? I think the importance of asking questions. Right, the right question. Is there such a thing as the right question? A good question? Don't know, but there is such a thing as the wrong question. I was decorating my house, my front room, a while ago, and trying to measure the walls to get the right amount of wallpaper. I just couldn't work it out. It's beyond me. And then I remembered my neighbour had decorated his house recently, the same room, which is exactly the same. So I went to him and said, "Hey Dave, you know, you decorated your room. I'm doing the same room. How many rolls of wallpaper did you get?" He said, 5. So I went and got 5, did the house, the room. I only used 3. So next time I saw him, I said, "Dave, you said 5 rolls of wallpaper. I only used 3. I've got 2 left." He said, "So have I." I think I asked him the wrong question. So what's a good question? I always think a good question is rule 1, don't ask what I call date of birth questions, facts. Answers that people already know the answer to. They're not helpful, are they? They don't help people. I'd like one day for somebody to say, "So what's your date of birth?" Well, how will that help me? I'm here to help me, and I'm not to help you. I'll give you that all written down, but questions that make people think, questions that make people reflect, questions that people maybe haven't asked themselves before, questions that make people stop and think, and then perhaps give a considered answer. Questions that people don't quite realise they have an answer to or a response to. I think they're so important, aren't they? And I see family therapists doing that a lot. I'm talking to the converted here, but that's what we do a lot, I think. And I do sometimes see colleagues asking a lot of date of birth type questions. Questions I like. I mean, we could go on all day in this, couldn't we? But you know, what idea has to be silenced for you to find your voice? What kind of a supervisor would you like me to be? Do you think the problems in your relationship are more to do with things inside your relationship or from outside? And whenever I get stuck, I think of the word reflexive questions, and for me, my memory is use the word if. Begin the sentence with the word if. That gets me started. And I think if. What am I going to ask? I begin with if. So examples would be, if your relationship improves, who is more likely to have changed? Or, if you were to see your child's behaviour as a protest, what might he be protesting against? I love reflexive questions like that. They're questions that people usually haven't been asked before, and make them think, and then constructing, I guess, the answer or the response to that together is so therapeutically useful. I've got too much information. I'm trying to figure out what not to talk about. I'm doing that with children. It can be great, can't it? Children, as we know, are fantastic. They can get in the way as well, and they're noisy. Let's be honest. When I see my new family and it's, oh, a 6-year-old with ADHD, can't wait. Sometimes happens, I must confess, but kids actually are great, aren't they? Kids have a great sense of power and what power they have in the world. A teacher said, in a drawing class, a 6-year-old girl was drawing, and he said to her, what are you drawing, Mary? She said, I'm drawing God. He said, oh, great, you know, nobody knows what God really looks like. She said, they will in a minute. What a fabulous sense of power she had. And then my son, the opposite almost, my son Tom came home one day when he was, I don't know, about 7, and he said, hey Dad, is the baby Jesus God? And I said, well. I tried my best to be neutral and explain, Christianity and what people believe. And then I said, of course there are other religions too, and other people believe different things, and explained as appropriately as I could about Islam and Buddhism and everything. And he listened very thoughtfully to all this, and when I'd finished he said, and what do we believe? And I thought, right now I have the power of this child's mind in my hands. And of course I said, well, what I believe, isn't necessarily what you have to believe. As you grow up, you'll read more and think more and change your mind a few times probably, and so it goes. And so he has, and of course he's an atheist now, thank God. Other games with kids, I I have a little game I play which is called How to Annoy Your Parents. We get parents telling us, giving us a catalogue of issues about what the kids have done. So, turning the tables a bit, I say, let's invent a list of what you can do to actually annoy your parents. And I exclude the parents from this. They can only watch and listen while the kids make up the list. So an example of some of the list includes... Shall I just let you read this? So it's great fun making these up with kids. This is my favourite one. Phone them up at 11 when you're drunk, ask if you can stay with your friends. When they ask you for a contact number for the friend's parents, say, oh no, my phone's running out of battery. Turn your phone off. That's great. So this is the last one. So it's great fun. Next thing, parents, instead of delivering a catalogue of, sins their children have committed, can actually laugh and think, you know what you're doing more than I thought. Okay, point 10? No, maybe point 5, I think. No, we'll move that. It's about gender and what's happened to gender. Obviously, as we've come to know them so lovingly, following our friend John, who's somewhere in the audience, I think, Burnham, the graces, the social graces are all important. But I do have a special place for gender, I must say, because it's kind of so omnipresent and so visible and so important. I know they all are. But I think it's taken a bit of a back seat lately. There was a time when there were loads of gender conferences and gender books and publications and everything, and articles galore. Everybody, there's so much less now. That's one quote from Olga Silverstein, perhaps. I was reminded of the importance of gender recently. I mean, I always am, really, every case, probably every session. But I was tracking a particular bit of behaviour with this family, and the kid was doing all sorts, and I was saying to the mother, so what do you do then? And she said, I tell him to go to bed and he won't go. So what do you do? Well, I turn the TV off when he's watching it, and I just say, you're not watching it. And what happens then? He runs upstairs. And what do you do then? I follow him upstairs and I go in. He tries to turn the computer on, but I turn it off. And what happens then? Well, then he goes to see his dad. And I said to his dad, and what do you do? And he said, I'm a painter and decorator. No, I didn't mean that. I thought, would a mother say that? Would a woman ever say that? I didn't know whether he wasn't listening or he thought, oh, sorry, are you talking about me? That's gender, isn't it? So there's that quote from Olga Silverstein. There's many, but I'll just show you 3. Marianne Walters also said this in the same year. And finally this one. I've recently submitted a doctorate at Birkbeck on masculinity and family therapy. If I jump to the very last page, I'll just show you quickly some of the major points and recommendations that I've made. Each one of them, warrants a whole discussion, and of course we can't do that. But if you want to know more, come to the Masculinity Conference in Liverpool in October, and these are them. This is what I got from people I interviewed. Seeking to make therapy male-friendly is important. Many men welcome challenges to their gender roles and find this liberating. The distinction between female over-responsibility and male irresponsibility is not as great as it once was. Patriarchy is bad for men as well as for women, and men do not consciously seek its advantages. Women will often defend or excuse their men, particularly with women therapists. Masculinism among colleagues is not uncommon, and despite male power, men are often in vulnerable positions in therapy, and this must be identified. Therapists often value the presence of colleagues of the other gender, but for different reasons. And finally, while all therapists work hard at making them therapy male-friendly, which may include working harder to engage men, some female family therapists refer to being softer with men. I find them really interesting. Some of them are well known, some of them to me were surprising, and I thought important stuff for us to know about. I had an interesting supervision session only 2 days ago with people in this room about gender. The importance of working. There's 2 women who work with a family where the father had been violent and has now left, and it happens so often. Men leave, but their legacy stays, and working with that is so difficult. And when the workers are all women, or compared to when there are men present, and the things that men can say are so it was such a big important issue of our work. Recently, me and my colleague Alan, who's at the back somewhere over there, had a really interesting session with this guy who was quite controlling as well of his wife, and Alan was asking him, he was doing a Jeremy Paxman act. He was saying, so did you check that out with your wife? Who was sitting there listening, and he spoke 6 sentences, and he said, yeah, but did you check it out with your wife? And he spoke another 4 sentences, and he laughed a bit and said, yeah, but did you check it out with your wife? And in the end, he had to answer the question. He said, no. And I was cringing, saying, oh, stop now. It kind of makes you a bit nervous sometimes to see these things. I just stopped. Well, I would have done something different. I would have said, I don't know what else to ask you. I'm getting a bit embarrassed asking you the same question, but I think it's really important. But Alan went on, and it was fantastic. The outcome was really good. And then we had a reflecting team conversation, and 2 men reflected on a couple where the man was controlling. And what he does is he writes a lot of letters to people on his wife's behalf. This is one of the things he doesn't check out with his wife. His wife is saying, you know, it's that famous thing, isn't it? Don't just do something. Don't just do something. Sit there. He said, I want him to just comfort me and reassure me, not get busy. But he gets busy and writes letters and asks people to review their work. And in our reflections, we said, I think we should write a letter to Mr. Jones, not his real name, and tell him that, you know, the service he's offering to his wife is very well intended, but in fact he needs to review his service, his offerings, and offer something different by listening to his wife and seeing what she actually wants. And his response immediately was, nice one. So that was his exact words, nice one. He said, you're right, I need to do that. And it was, and I thought, 2 women, or possibly even 1 woman, delivering that could have been, to quote Virginia Goldner, dismissed as just another nag. How long have we got? About 10 minutes. I've got 10 more things to go through. Emotionality in family therapy. Big issue. And language, more of language in family therapy. Probably won't have time to do both. If I just mention one about emotionality. Sometimes in supervision or when work, I try to get in touch with people's visceral feelings about, you know, the work they're doing and the people they're working with. And so there was one recently, and I said to the work supervisee, so she was working with a mother and daughter. The mother was a headmistress, and I said, so what do you want to say to this headmistress? And she said, I want to say, I'm wondering why, and I said, no, don't wonder, from the gut, what do you want to actually say to this headmistress woman, this woman? Well, I want to say, I'm curious about how come, and I said, no, don't be curious, you're being a therapist, you're being helpful, you're trying to be, you know, good. Don't forget all that, just say what you really feel and what you really want to say to her if you were not trying to be helpful. And she said, oh, okay. She said, you're a fucking headmistress, why can't you sort this out? I thought, that's more like it. Once you get in touch with that, I think, you know, we can make progress. A lot more to say about emotionality and therapy, but am I allowed to swear in these things? Somebody gonna throw me out in a minute. There's a big bouncer at the back. Language. what a thing it is. I love this quote. Language is a cracked kettle on which we beat out tunes for birds to dance to, while all the time we long to move the stars to pity. I love Flaubert, I love that quote. Language is many things. Language is not grammar, though. Imagine trying to correct people's grammar in therapy. I'm sympathetic in the apocryphal tale of the American student who goes to Oxford, and on his first day he sees he's lost, and he sees somebody who says, "Hey man, where's the library at?" And the professor he happens to stop says, "My dear sir, in Oxford we do not end sentences with prepositions." He says, "Oh, well, in that case, where's the library at, asshole?" And punctuation, I love punctuation. Isn't it amazing how one little comma can change things in the sentence? What is this thing called love? One comma changes it to, what's this thing called love? Or a better one full stop and one comma changes, in fact, reverses the meaning of woman without her man is nothing, becomes woman without her man is nothing. Hang on, I've got that wrong, haven't I? What did it mean? Woman without her man is nothing. Full stop and comma, woman. Without... I forgot the comma. Woman without her, comma, man is nothing. Did I get it in the end? Oh. I ran this one past my daughter, and she listened to it, she got it, and she said, "I'm hungry, let's eat, Dad." Good one, I said, "You've got it." And I love the language of football. You hear foreign managers speak when they've got a new signing, they say, "Oh, he's a great new player, he knows his way around the pitch. He knows where the goal is." Isn't that like a minimum requirement? Imagine family therapy speak doing that. "So how's your new colleague who's joined you on an 8C? "Oh, she's great. She understands how to arrange the chairs in a circle. She knows what a question is." Kind of minimum requirements. And of course, what we call things is crucial, isn't it? Social constructionism, we all love it. But it does matter. There are a million examples we could all give, but you know, just a couple. The Israeli raid on Gaza, called Operation Rainbow. The Ministry of Defence used to be called the War Office. That had to change, didn't it? And if you've got spots and blackheads, you go to the beauty department. But I love the names they give to hurricanes, you know. Recently, Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Irene. Lovely names. You don't give any idea of what damage they do. When are they going to be more honest? I'm waiting for Hurricane Bastard. I think the person who invented the tagline for Pravda, the Russian newspaper, had a good sense of humour. But I can't get it. How do I get rid of that? And so often there's people give a lot of superfluous information, don't they? We all do this, you know. We don't cut to the chase, or as I've sometimes said, cut the crap, get to the point. And people do talk at great length about things, cases and family history and uncles, grandparents at great length, and really the issues are sometimes very much shorter than that. Superfluous details everywhere. I was at King's Cross Station last month in London, not Sydney, Carmel, and an announcement came over the tannoy. It said, "The 12:04 train at platform 6 to Edinburgh, calling at Stevenage, Doncaster, York, Durham, Leeds, Newcastle, Morpeth, Berwick-upon-Tweed, Dunbar, Edinburgh Waverley, arriving at Edinburgh Haymarket at 16:27 is cancelled." Too much information, and I think we can do that as well. I want to show this important quote, especially for Brian, but I think a lot of people. "One characteristic of the emerging postmodern science is its stress on non-linearity and discontinuity. This is evident, for example, in chaos theory and the theory of phase transitions, as well as in quantum gravity. At the same time, feminist thinkers have pointed out the need for an adequate analysis of fluidity, in particular turbulent fluidity. These two themes are not as contradictory as it might seem, with strong non-linearity and smoothness. Fluidity is sometimes associated with discontinuity, so a synthesis is by no means out of the question. Do you like that? But we diss Professor so-called Knott because this is the famous article that you may have heard of, which he submitted as a spoof just to see if he could get a complete and utter load of nonsense published. And he did. And if you want to know, this is in Social Text number 46, 1996, and it's called Transgressing the Boundaries Towards Hermeneutics of Quantum Gravity. But family therapists are not immune from such things, are we? So what kind of language is permissible? What level of provocation is okay? Controversial, possibly here. John Lennon, in Defending Women's Rights, wrote a song called Woman is the Nigger of the World. And Roddy Doyle, in decrying the position of the Irish in society, wrote, the Irish are the niggers of Europe. So this language is powerful. It's enough to get you thrown out as a big brother. But is it acceptable in that context, when people are writing in an anti-oppressive way? Can white men like that do that? It's a controversial, complicated world we operate in, isn't it? Oh, I just wanted to say, check out the Postmodern Generator. It's full of spoof articles in postmodernism, which is a great laugh. And I've got a couple of minutes left. One more minute, not two, or one. Well, now is the time to talk about more clinical examples, which of course I won't be able to do. But I suppose if you read the Australian Journal of Family Therapy or the recent context, there's some stuff in that, in an article called Cut the Crap, about these very things and the use of language in therapy, based on some of the things I've said and some new stuff. I think I'm going to end 30 seconds early. Is that allowed? I'm going to end there. So thank you very much indeed, and enjoy the conference.